I'm going to start a playlist. It's going to be called Pre-Pharmacy Answers. And in this video, I'm going to start it off with one of the toughest questions to answer. Is pharmacy school worth it? It's a tough economic climate right now for pharmacists, and I want to talk about that. So first of all, I'm Tony Guerra. I teach at Des Moines Area Community College. You're always welcome to email me. I get a lot of emails from students, and I've never actually posted any of their questions. I'd never post the person and their question, but if you want to put under the comments, questions that you have, I'll be happy to answer them with a video, so that other students might, get something out of it too. Okay. So the first thing I want to do with this question is I want to rephrase the question. Okay. So is pharmacy school worth it? Is a yes or no question, and there's a lot of places that are looking at answering that question that are already out there, and I want to just list them now for you. So Pharmacy Times has a bunch of them, Drug Topics as well, and then StudentDoctor.net. You see a lot of students going back and forth about what's going on. If you want to get some good video feedback on the topic, Paul from thepharmacistblog.com put up some good stuff, and he just recently, I want to say it was 11 months ago, but it's going to be signed into law May 11th. Unfortunately, one of our daughters is got an MRI scheduled for that day, so it's actually a kind of a tough day for us as a family. But May 11th, they're going to sign in at Washington State this provider status law, so that's a big push for pharmacy. Matt from EngineeredTruth.com, he's got 180,000 views. He's got 80,000 followers. On just that one video where he interviews Kevin Yee, but I think he's got like 7 or 8 million views on his channel. So he's really, a great resource, and both of them do a really good job or all three of them do a really good job of being very direct and really honest to what's going on out there. And what I want to do is give you a little bit of perspective, because to say old school is kind of an understatement, but I went to high school in the 80s, and my PharmD came after the bachelor's changed. So I was with the changeover class, and if I had finished my pre-pharmacy in 2 years, I would have gotten a bachelor's degree in pharmacy, and then maybe I would have gotten a PharmD afterwards, and I'll show you how that worked. But I got there in 93, so because I got there in 93, I got the PharmD right away, and that was really important later on. Okay, so I'm going to change this to the open-ended question, so rephrase it to, how can I make pharmacy school worth it? And the reason that I'm rephrasing it is, when I went to pharmacy school, I didn't have a parent that was a pharmacist. The only time I'd spent in a pharmacy was being a volunteer. What attracted me to pharmacy was that I liked chemistry. Even though I had to take organic chemistry 2 twice, I still liked it, and I wanted to be around people that liked it too. So I went to pharmacy school because instead of going to get a bachelor's degree in chemistry, and I really didn't understand what chemists did at the time, and I was still thinking chemical engineer or something like that, but it was very clear how what the British call a chemist, what we call a pharmacist, used chemistry and their knowledge of chemistry, and I wanted to be around those people. So I didn't go to pharmacy school because I knew what a pharmacist was. I knew that I liked chemistry inherently, and I wanted to be around those type of people. So let's look at the 3 different things that I'm going to go over in this video. The value from money saved, the value from time saved, and the value from 2 degrees. So again, how can I make pharmacy school worth it? And I think if you want to talk about it in one word, you've got to get value out of it. Okay? And what is that value? How am I going to get the job I want? How am I going to have the lifestyle that I want? Why I'm staying away from Excel salary numbers. The general way to talk about return on investment, and this is relatively recent, that when you go to college, you're so focused on exactly what job you're going to get When you're talking about, Harvard opening up way back when, you could be a lawyer or a priest or a physician, and it was way back then. It was all about liberal education, and what you did, for a job was really not something that they focused on. So I'm going to stay away from the Excel salary numbers because Paul from pharmacistblog.com did the tech versus pharmacist salary numbers. Should a person stay as a pharmacy technician, or should they go to pharmacy school? And over 30 years, how do the numbers add up with the amount of debt that a pharmacist is going to take on? And he got beat up a little bit in the comments, and I think there was a misinterpretation of what he was trying to do. What he was trying to do was just put monetarily out there how does it compare for somebody that's going to college versus somebody that's not going to college? Because in our current, the way things are right now, most people say, well, you got to go to college to succeed. And I think what he was saying was, well, when you go to college and amass that much debt, there's actually a point where it might make sense to not go to college, to get on the job training, or maybe a better way to put it is to say that you should start working in a career that can help you pay your way through. And I think that's what he was getting at. I'm in charge of the pharmacy tech program here at DMAC, and many of the students here are getting their tech diploma to just get a year of college in something that they like, but also to get a job. And to be honest, most of them aren't going to be pharmacists. Many of them are going to be nurses or other health professionals. And what they've decided is, I'm really mindful of money. And what I want to do is I want to look at getting a job. And then once I get a job and established as somebody who can make my own money, then I'll start spending money on that next step. So I feel bad that Paul got beat up so much over it, but I think he was trying to do a really good thing, which is say, once you create a debt load of $180,000 or close to $200,000, things are very different. Okay? When I graduated with $40,000 in debt, and the salaries were somewhere around $65,000. So you're talking that my salary was 150% of my debt. Okay, so for that to happen now with $180,000 in debt, you're talking about $270,000 a year, and obviously pharmacists don't make that. So I think he brought up a good point, but I'm letting you know why you're not going to see those salary numbers. Okay? So first of all, what represents value? I really inadvertently ran into value. The nice thing about where I graduated from, Maryland, they actually archived a bunch of the old catalogs. And the way that it worked back then, and I think this was in effect till 1992, I put a note at the bottom. This came from the 1984 to 1986 catalog. And how it used to work was you could go to the University of Maryland itself in College Park, or you could go to the community colleges. And those students would come up to Baltimore and finish 3 more years. Okay, so it was still that 2 years undergrad plus 3 years of undergrad. Okay, and the part that I took out of it was the experiential component. Okay? Because of provider status, because of some things in the academic literature talking about retention and things like that, really, most pharmacy schools are very focused on the pharmacist being a clinician. Okay? And I never really saw myself as a clinician. I was kind of old school pharmacist in pharmacy school, where I was more that entrepreneurial. I really wanted to have my own business. I didn't know if I saw myself necessarily owning a pharmacy, but I did see myself running a pharmacy, managing a pharmacy, doing those kinds of things. I just really enjoyed that type of stuff. And what I pulled out of this catalog was, with the BS of Pharmacy, 2 months of the required time plus 3 months of elective time. So there were 5 months of rotations. Okay, right now we have a year with the PharmD, and only 2 months was scripted. Though I think there was a summer month that you had to do something, and that first month was retail, or the other one was hospital, and so you got an idea of the two big ones. But 3 months was elective time, so you're talking over half was elective, and in an area that a student desires to follow as a career. And what I want to do is kind of point out that the actual pattern is the same, where now you have to graduate with your PharmD, but what you do with your PharmD after is kind of your elective time. So they've kind of made it so that you're all clinical all the time in many pharmacy schools. And I want to talk a little bit about non-clinical, because I am a non-clinical pharmacist, and I don't know how much is out there on non-clinical opportunities. So the PharmD back then, you would get your bachelor's in pharmacy, and it was a 5-year program. And then you would get your PharmD, and you could look at the pictures. The classes were like 15 or 20 people. So coming from maybe a class of 100 for the BS in pharmacy, I'm not sure if it was that big at the time. And then of that, 20% would go on to clinical. And I hesitate to say that this was, the highest academic percent. That I don't know what the PharmD admissions process was like. I have absolutely no idea. But it was those students that really had an interest in being a clinical practitioner. So they had a small group, 15 to 20 of them, and they had PharmD classes. I have no idea what it was like. I remember meeting PharmD students, but I didn't know much more about it. So in 1993, though, it went to an all PharmD. So instead of going for 2 plus 3 plus 2, which would be 7 years, I would have gone for 2 plus 4, which is 6 years. It took me 7 because I took some classes over. I was first generation college. I didn't really know what I was doing. But I saved a year that I would have, and I got the same credential. I want to be careful with that, because just because I got the same credential doesn't necessarily mean I had the same skill set. Being with maybe a smaller class, 15, 20 people that are so focused on clinical, was a different type of training, I think, than we got when you've got 100 students getting that. So it was a great experience. I loved Maryland. I loved being in my home state and being able to do that. But at the same time, it was really kind of like going away, because I came from the suburbs, and although I probably could get there in like 45 minutes from my house, maybe an hour, being in an urban school of pharmacy was pretty cool. That I got that experience, and it was completely different than where I grew up. So I'm going to go through the 3 parts of this. Start with the value for money saved and tuition, and how that works. So talking about the first 2 years of college, and of course I'm biased because I teach at a community college, or maybe I'm just knowledgeable about it. But community colleges have established that they're the least expensive place to go. And I'm not just talking about tuition, because many of our students are coming from homes. They already live in the community. Maybe they're coming a mile or two to get to school. So it's not really an uprooting. It's just, okay, I'll come and take the classes. We've got some great programs here. Cross enrollment. Cross enrollment is where you can take a class at one of 3 colleges around, and what it does is it allows you to be at a 4-year university, getting some of their advising, getting some of their classes, and getting an idea of what it's like out there. So it's really, in terms of tuition, you can't beat community college. In our state, the in-state college happens to be about double what it costs tuition-wise at the community college. Okay? And again, that in-state college might not be as convenient as the community colleges. So I think we have 15 community colleges in our state, and then 3 in-state colleges, or 3 of the larger in-state colleges. Okay? The out-of-state college, again, if you're going out of state, if you're coming from out of state into here, it was 20,000. That number is just all over the map if I were to leave from here and go somewhere else. So just to give you an idea, I made it even. I think it's actually 21,000. But this way you can just see that a community college student in-state pays 4,000. An in-state college student to the four-year college pays double that. And then an out-of-state student to the four-year college pays 5 times what a community college student would. The private college. Looking at the private colleges, I saw prices from 20,000 to 45,000, and I want to be very careful with this number. When I was looking at colleges back then, they would send you these brochures and things like that in the mail. Now I'm sure you just get emails and notices and things like that. But I threw away, recycled every single private college that I got. And I did that because I didn't know that, I assumed that the sticker price was the price. And my parents and I had talked about it, and we said, okay, this is the budget. And every single private college was out of the budget. So it wasn't even a thought. Okay. Some of the out-of-state schools, though, had in-state tuition when I was coming out of high school, and those were the ones that I looked at. And I did end up going out of state for 2 years to get my AA and paid in-state tuition. And it was actually cheaper to go out of state than it was to stay in state. And that was, it just happened to be my state was much more expensive. That state was cheaper. But my point or asterisk here is don't reject yourself. I rejected myself from all those schools. I have no idea. It might have been cheaper to go to a private school, or it might have been a comparable price. But make sure you know what the actual price will be before you turn down a private. My wife had a great education here at Drake in town, and she loves it. Still friends with many of the people that she went to school with, and they have a great network. So don't reject yourself from the privates. Value for money saved, tuition. So when we're talking about actually going to pharmacy school, so the first 2 years or 4 years, depending on how you do it, the pharmacy school years, I'm going to go over 4 different kind of options. But I first want to mention the region of the country matters a lot. If you're in the Midwest versus the coast, so I'm from the East Coast, and the amount of house that we have here in Iowa is, I guess you get about double or triple for your money from where I was from in a very expensive part of Maryland. Again, the first thing you want to kind of look at is, region of the country. Now, as a student, though, sharing a room, it's not always that much more expensive if you're going to be on the coast. And, certainly if you're a couple miles from home or something like that, it was really nice to be able to go home sometimes. I wouldn't knock out the coast just because they're more expensive, especially as a student. But just be aware that if you're going to make that decision, what are the differences going to be in terms of cost? Okay, so in-state, generally in-state is cheaper. What's happening now is when I graduated, we were starting to get to that point where there was the pharmacist shortage. And you heard stories, and I don't know if they were true or not, where people were getting leases on BMWs, and they were getting these exorbitant salaries and all of this. Okay. But what's happening now is, so we've got all these pharmacy schools, and we've got a declining number of applications to pharmacy schools. There's a couple reasons for that, and you can look at the academic literature for it, but one of them is that we simply just don't have a lot of people going into college. The other, maybe it's from what's out there, the media that's out there on the oversupply. The law schools got hit with this recently, and then they had to kind of shrink, and now pharmacies being hit with it as well. So my recommendation is to widen your search. My job as a pre-pharmacy advisor is to simply provide the best advice I can. And what you might find is that there might be some schools that are regionally close to you that might provide in-state tuition. So the University of Illinois Chicago, I found out I'm part of a larger group called, a national group for pre-health advising. And there are certain scholarships for students that might come from Iowa that could go to the University of Illinois in Chicago, or maybe the Rockford campus, and they would get in-state tuition. And that's a game changer. Generally, the in-state school was insulated from that because out-of-state schools wouldn't or couldn't provide that discount. But once you start seeing that, and you start seeing this active recruiting of the students, the best students, then you're going to maybe get a lot more level playing field, a lot more options. So my recommendation to my students is, don't turn down a school that's comparable if you want to get the experience of going out of state. And I think there's a lot of value to it. My dad's an immigrant, and he's kind of taught me a lot about how things internationally, it's just good to get out of the country to see how things are that way. And I think it's good to get out of your state to see how things are. Maybe you do it by going to an in-state school and then doing some of your rotations out of state, or maybe you actually go to an out-of-state school. So just to let you know that there is an out-of-state with an in-state tuition option at some schools. Private in-state versus out-of-state. So if you're already living in a state and there's a private school near you, it might be near your family or something like that, and you can save quite a bit of money. Okay? But the nice thing about privates is that the price is the same if you're in-state or out-of-state in terms of tuition. So if you're looking at the privates, then you can kind of make it a destination thing if you really wanted to. So maybe you've always wanted to live in Washington State or California or Florida or Texas or something like that. Okay? But I don't know, I'm a little biased because I know Drake and how well the students that I've met are, and I know what experience my wife had. So I'm a little biased towards Drake being just such a great school. Out of state with out of state tuition, this is kind of a brutal option. Some students will get into pharmacy at all costs, and that literally means at all cost, where you're going, maybe you didn't get to the in-state school, maybe it's one of those top tier schools, and I want to be very careful about top tier. It's because you've got like the U.S. News Report, and those schools that have research programs are generally going to be way higher in terms of their ranking than maybe some of the great private schools that are available. So an out-of-state, maybe you're in a state where the state school is really selective, even for in-state students, because usually in-state students, they cut them a break, and you've looked at the privates, you've looked at out-of-state, and you decide, I just want to pay out-of-state tuition. I'm going to pay out-of-state tuition. Just know that that's probably the most expensive option that you could probably have. Okay. Right. Well, let's look at value from time saved. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is a non-clinical option, and I'm going to put a little asterisk next to age. The age of pharmacy students ranges from 18 even to, I guess you could be 18. I've known of a 19-year-old student all the way till, the 40s, 50s, where, maybe a job changer or just want something new. And so I'm just putting that for reference. I'm in no way saying that, this is the age of pharmacy students. And then the number of years. So let's look at this, kind of second bullet, value from time saved in the non-clinical. And by non-clinical, what I mean is you've not done residency work to have some kind of specific clinical skills. It doesn't mean you can't get a job in a hospital or something like that where you have clinical experiences, and it doesn't mean that you can't do long-term care or some clinical stuff in retail. I'm just saying that it's non-residency, but residency didn't really fit. Clinical just seemed better. So let's look at the fastest option, the 2+3. So you do 2 years of pre-pharmacy, and I guess you could, the way that I've seen college students now, or high school students take college classes, I guess you could actually probably get away with this in 4, where you have 1 pre-pharmacy year. But pre-pharmacy, generally, it takes 2 years, and you really got to work to get it done in 2 years. That's a lot of credits. And then I'm not sure if they really call it P1, P2, P3, because what they have is usually quarters. So it's, the first 2 quarters make what would have been your P1 year, your professional year 1, and then 2 more quarters would have made professional year 2, and then 2 more quarters would have made professional year 3, and 2 more quarters 4. So I'm just going to call it your first, second, and third year, and I'm talking about the Julian calendar, 365 days year. Okay, so you're 20, you leave high school, you go into pharmacy school, and you graduate, and you're 23 years old. Okay. There's 2+4. This I feel is a little more common. 2+3 is kind of the trend. The newer schools tend to be 2+3, kind of that value adding. And then you do your 2 years of pre-pharmacy and then 4 years. You say, well, why wouldn't I just do 2+3? That's so much better. Why would I do 2+4? Well, 2+3, my understanding is that you go summer, and that's a lot. So somebody that's doing 2+4 is just, I don't want to say it's relaxing. It's certainly challenging, just as pharmacy school is. But 2+4, it's a little bit more, I don't want to say a manageable pace, but just a different pace than 2+3. The 4+4, I especially want to talk about this because some of the schools are really pushing that you need a bachelor's degree to get into pharmacy school. And some schools can pull that off because they've got so many applications for, just those few spots. But why would they push it so hard? When clearly you could be in the workforce 2 years earlier, and not pay tuition, and be out there getting a job. And if you look at the academic literature, you're going to find that retention increases if you have a bachelor's degree. So as a pharmacy school, you don't want your students to quit or leave or fail out. And so if they get students that have bachelor's degree, they're less likely to have that academic difficulty, and that's why they do it. Maybe, and I'll point out some reasons to get an undergrad degree later on, but if you're thinking, I have to get an undergrad degree, that's only true if the school that you're going to makes you get an undergrad degree, and there aren't many of them. Now, there's preference, where somebody with a 4-year degree gets preference over somebody that has 2 or 3 years. And again, that's mostly because of that retention factor, that they know they're going to retain that student, and they're just doing what's best for their own college. But just know that might not be what's best for you. Okay. I just put, just so you can see, because we're going to get to the 11th year with physicians, and one of the pharmacy options, which when I start talking about clinical on the next page. So the MD requires a bachelor's degree, and I'm not accelerating it. I mean, maybe they get their bachelor's degree in 3 or something like that. And then they have their, M1, M2, M3, M4 year, just like we have P1, P2, P3, P4. And then my understanding is that as a physician, all of them do residency. Maybe that's not true. I don't know, but and then they have their postgraduate year 1, postgraduate year 2, postgraduate year 3, and then that's after the 11 years, that's when they become practicing physicians who are no longer residents and go out into the world at 29. So you can see that pharmacy's value adding, getting you into the workforce at 23 versus 29, is historically the same. Like I was talking about the BS from before. So the bachelor's degree in pharmacy, somebody that would go into retail pharmacy or go into the family business or own a pharmacy, they went to school and they graduated at 23, and they would have been working for 6 years before the physician would be working full time. And so that was a huge difference in the way things used to be, and they can still be for somebody who's not necessarily interested in doing PGY1 or postgraduate years in pharmacy. Okay, so this is non-clinical on the pharmacy side. I don't know non-clinical MDs. I think that would definitely be a minority of them. So kind of being a little unfair in that I'm putting that residency year there on the MD side. But understand that as a pharmacist, you can start working at 23, and an MD, you'd probably be somewhere around 29 before you started. Now, here's where it gets a little bit dicey. So the clinical pharmacist, or the clinical jobs that are out there, because now we have so many pharmacy graduates and we have so many residency programs, that it's becoming increasingly necessary to have this PGY1 or PGY2 if you want to get certain jobs. I put PGY3 there only because it's something that's, I think, starting. I read something about it. I don't really know that much about it, but I know that PGY3 year is one where you are like a sub-specialty, maybe combining two specialties. So like pediatric cardiology or pediatric oncology or something very, very specific. Okay? And I also want to talk about where you would be in life. Okay? So the further out you get, I feel like, from high school, the more likely you're going to have family and things like that. And the more specialized you are, the less likely it is that you're going to find something in your area. So there's plenty of pharmacies in the entire state, but the need for a pediatric oncologist is going to be relatively rare. And so you're going to have to consider, okay, well, if I'm going to have a family and where do I want to start that family? How's it going to fit in with what your plan is in terms of time? Okay, so if you're going to be a clinical pharmacist, it seems like to me and that you would want to make sure that you have an accelerated program, because if you're going to, and I'm just going to keep it at PGY2 for the years I'll talk about, because most don't go past PGY2. So if you do an accelerated program, you can be 25 years old, and that's when I was when I graduated. So you can be PGY2 and start looking for those clinical positions. Okay? But if you decided to get that bachelor's degree instead, then you've put yourself 2 years behind. And I'll get my pointer out here. So when you're looking at clinical positions, they care about your experience here. I can't imagine that they really care about this. That you had 300 or 400 level biology classes which might have dealt with other species, I can't imagine matters too much. So if you both start in the same year here and somebody goes through an accelerated program, okay, of 5 years versus somebody who goes through the 4+4, you're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4. That math can't be right. So 1, 2, 3, a 3-year difference or a 2-year difference. Okay? So somebody who did the accelerated program 2+3, 2+4 has already gotten a job and been working in that job for 3 years or 2 years before you even start applying for that job. Okay? And that just seems in a market that's this, I don't want to say it's this tough for pharmacists, because I think that there's certainly opportunities out there, but I don't know if I would necessarily delay it if my plan was to do 2 years after. Okay? So the difference between 25 and 28, I feel like, is a significant difference if you're going to, do those PGYs, because they are a lot of work, and there's just an exhaustion factor that comes from being in school maybe for too long. Okay? And then the physician just kind of put it together that if you do that undergrad, professional 4 years, PGY 1, 2, 3, you've actually equaled the amount of time that a physician goes, so from 18 to 29 years old. And I'll back up to the slide before. So the whole thing was, certainly when I was in school, 92, pharmacist gets out in 5, gets a job in 5, starts working, and then has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years of work before a physician, the point where a physician was, starting at where the kind of entry level is. Okay? And now we're at the point where you can make it so that you tie where a physician is. Okay? So I wonder if some students are looking at that and saying, if I'm going to do all this and I'm going to go through 11 years of school and residency, I might as well just be a doctor. Okay? And I wonder if that's happening. Okay? Now, pharmacy and medicine are very different in terms of what you'd be doing, but I just wonder what that thought process is, and I'd be curious if you want to comment on it. So the value of 2 degrees is kind of the third part I want to talk about. So I'm not knocking the bachelor's, let me turn off this pointer. I'm not knocking the bachelor's degree and then PharmD, but what I am saying is that don't get the same degree. Okay? So if you're a biology undergrad or chemistry undergrad, well, you're going to have so much biology and chemistry or anatomy and physiology and so forth in your PharmD program that I don't really think you're getting much out of 300 and 400 levels in biology and chemistry. I can't imagine that you're really going to use that too much. It'll help you a little bit in that first year maybe, but I don't think it's going to help you that much. But if your choice is to have, the PharmD and in some way incorporate a different field, and I didn't mean to make that joke with agriculture like fields, but agriculture and PharmD, maybe if you're a dairy farmer or something like that, that you would care about the medicines and start thinking veterinary pharmacy or something like that. Business plus the PharmD, so it's very common for undergraduate students in business to go into pharmacy. Maybe they want to own a pharmacy, maybe they want to manage a pharmacy. And in terms of job options, we immediately think of going to the back of the store, the pharmacy part of the store. But we could just as easily, with a business degree, work in the front of the store, working the way up from assistant to associate, manager, and things like that. And I think that might be a direction some are going. You could go into design. And when I mean design, I'm not necessarily talking about just art. I'm talking about the way things are designed. Engineering plus pharmacy. I've seen that a couple of times. This one seems a good pairing. Kinesiology and nutrition. So not just saying, okay, well, I'd really like you to lose some weight, and here's your therapy for cholesterol or whatever it is, but to actually have that background where you understand the kinesiology and the nutrition factors that make for healthy eating, for healthy exercise. Liberal arts. So my undergrad is in English. I'm a little bit unusual in that I finished my bachelor's degree after I got my PharmD, but I think there's a lot to be said for the humanities and science discipline like pharmacy, in that you really understand how to communicate, and my understanding is that there's going to be a new communication component with the NABPLEX. When you graduate from pharmacy school, you take the board exam, and that communication component, I think English or communications or really any of the liberal arts would help you a lot more with that. And then the sciences, Again, there's so much biology and chemistry in the pharmacy program. I can't really see why you would do a 300, 400 level in undergrad unless you were just kind of searching for what you want and then came across um, pharmacy later. Um, so the value from 2 degrees, graduate degrees, here's where value really comes out of it. So down the street, and I'm using Draken as an example because they have such great dual degree programs. But the PharmD MBA is something that you can get in 6. I think you have to add 1 year if you get a Juris Doctor or a law degree. The Master of Public Administration, I think. The Master of Public Health, same thing. Those are just in the 6 years. There are schools that offer the master's degree, so you add 1 year to the PharmD, and then there's a PhD where you add 3 years. So there are a number of colleges that offer these, and to get these 2 degrees separately would be a completely different price point than getting them together. And I think the PharmD MBA or MPA and MPH work really well because you could get it in 6 with just the PharmD degree, and I think that's a lot of value there. Going back, how would I do it all over again? Understanding what I would need to take, I would have taken a lot of my humanities, social science, communication classes during high school. We didn't really have dual enrollment the way that dual enrollment is used these days. But I think would have actually gotten a BA in English. I would have stayed with the same major. I love to write. I love to read. And I would have taken my pre-pharmacy coursework. And I would have taken 3 years to do it because, taking 12 credits at a time, working, I really enjoyed doing both. I always had a food job though. So I would be able to eat while I, in pharmacy school or, in undergrad, and food is just so expensive. So I always had some kind of food job. But I wouldn't really just accelerate it and make it happen as fast as I possibly could. I think I would try to get out with my bachelor's degree still. And I wouldn't get a biology or chemistry one because there was so much biology and chemistry in the PharmD. But I would get a humanities degree. And then professional grad. Back then, I probably would have gotten a PharmD MBA. As a community college instructor, we're not only in charge of teaching, but we have an administrative component. And the MBA, while a lot of it is business, what I do as an administrator has a lot more to do with the MBA. So, setting the budget, recruitment, strategy, meeting with people, all those things. So I would have gotten my PharmD MBA in some kind of program where I could get it in 4 years. I wanted to make a last slide and kind of talk about, what pharmacy is, because it's one of the most versatile careers that I know of. Not only, as you've seen, in the number of ways that you can get a degree or this doctorate in pharmacy. If you're going to be a physician, it's, here's your undergrad, here's your, M1 through 4 year. But with pharmacy, you can go year round, you can do all these things, and so many different ways to get your degree. But also, the way that you describe a pharmacist, or the way that pharmacists describe themselves, is kind of cool, because there's so many things you can put in front of it. So I just put _pharmacist, because if you're going to write down your name and what how you describe yourself, you would probably put an underscore there, just like you put an underscore where you can't have a space there. And it also sounds weird to say space pharmacist, because it sounds like I'm going to Mars or something, hang out with Matt Damon, in The Martian or something, right? So if I were to describe myself now, I am an Iowa academic writer, YouTube full-time pharmacist. But in the past or now, I was in Arizona, I was in Maryland, I was an Iowa pharmacist. So many times pharmacists describe themselves by where they're licensed or where they went to college. Right? I was also a chain, a supermarket, a mail order, and I call myself a teaching pharmacist, although I put academic in there. I'm technically not part of the academy. The academy is made up of all the pharmacy schools, so I'm not a pharmacy school, um, instructor in the general sense. If I had a rotation student here, then I've got an appointment to certain schools, but I prefer to call myself just a teaching pharmacist, or I call myself an instructor. And then I volunteered often to, especially when we were out there in Iowa City, where I would be part of some volunteer events, and that was always fun. I was a student pharmacist, PGY1, which is that PGY1 residency year. I was a part-time pharmacist. I was a full-time pharmacist. Interestingly enough, I was a real estate agent pharmacist, where for 6 years I worked as a realtor, and there was actually a point where I made a lot more money in real estate, so I didn't do any pharmacy work. But most of my clients were actually pharmacists, so that was kind of interesting. I never really approached any customers about it. I never even really thought to. So it wasn't like, I get your prescription ready. Hey, are you looking to buy a house? It actually ended up being many of the people in pharmacy school and in my pharmacy fraternity. I'm a writer. I've written some books on pharmacology to help students, because there isn't really a good book out there that explains the stems, understanding psyllin and things like that. And then YouTube pharmacist, I guess this is kind of a new thing. I don't make any money from YouTube, but it would be a way to describe myself. So I didn't make a summary slide, but what I would do is, in terms of answering the question which we started with, is pharmacy worth it? I think pharmacy is absolutely worth it, and how pharmacy is worth it is going to be very individualized. So if you want to, talk to me about it, if you want to email me about it, or put comments down, I'm always happy to answer questions, whether you're from DMAC or not. And I'll give you my 2 cents. And I just got an email 2 days ago. I was really excited. Another student from DMAC got in, and it's interesting because we actually never met. He just kept looking at the videos I put up there. He would email me from time to time, and many students are autonomous like that. They just need a little help here and there, and they'll just come to you for that. But how important what those guys, Paul and Matt at Engineered Truth, and Kevin, what they're doing in terms of kind of getting out there the information that helps everybody make a good decision for them. So feel free to email, feel free to comment, and I hope this was helpful.